David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, this is the last general debate of this parliamentary term. It's the last week of this parliamentary term, and national summing up of its achievements was heralded by the great Maurice Williamson. Where was the Prime Minister? Where was the Minister of Finance in a week when economic history was made? Mr Speaker, it's also the last week of the school term, and I guess the public could be forgiven for confusing the two because sometimes this place resembles a schoolyard brawl. But occasionally, Mr Speaker, we get the opportunity to rise above that, or we get enforced upon us a report card or two which doesn't come from within this classroom but comes from assessors outside it. And so it's appropriate, sir, that this House reflects upon, in this week of all weeks, the report card that has been given to New Zealand. Can you imagine when Mr English gets home and he opens his school report? He finds that he's got a D, indeed a double D. A double D based on an assessment, an objective assessment, not of national standards, but of international standards. International standards that have been laid bare for all to see. The first one is total debt. He got a D for that because New Zealanders have borrowed too much and he has done nothing about it. The total level of debt is now close to that of Southern Europe, which is why this government has put New Zealand in the company of only 1/4 of the OECD that has been downgraded in the last 3 years, the others being Greece, Ireland, Portugal, Spain, Iceland, Italy, and the United States and New Zealand. That is the performance of this government according to the international referee, the international assessment. The government's got a D, sir, for not applying itself to the capital gains tax that could have solved that international debt problem. The second criterion in the international standards is the current account deficit, and they got a D for over-dependence on commodity exports, a D for a widening current account. And the Minister of Finance might like to spend his whole time in question time talking about previous governments, but the fact remains that in his budget, the current account widens every year for the next 5 years to 7% of GDP round numbers. And that, sir, is the standard that he's been assessed upon. Forget parliamentary debate. Just think about the facts this week because the public has access to an international assessment. Mr Speaker, he got a D for savings performance. Well, hardly surprising. After cutting KiwiSaver and starving the New Zealand Superannuation Fund, how was he going to get a pass mark on that one? The recommendation is that he apply himself to a strong savings policy like the other kids at school are bound to. We'll see if he does. We'll see if he does. And if that wasn't enough, Mr Speaker, in this last week of term, as well as international standards, they got a dose of their own. They got national standards from the Auditor General, no less. And the answer to those national standards wasn't just try harder, could do better. It was you've lost billions of dollars of taxpayers' money because you couldn't do, not you, sir, the Minister, couldn't exercise the most basic routine oversight.
Not funny now.
What did the national standards assessors say? They said that the New Zealand Treasurer wasn't even up to monitoring finance companies that they had guaranteed the loans of because they didn't want to intervene. Hang on, they'd already guaranteed the loans. Money was flooding in to expand their debt books by a factor of 1,000%, and the Treasury didn't want to monitor it because it would have been interventionist.
Wow.
Isn't that ideology gone wrong? What did the Minister of Finance do about it? In the face of this appalling lapse of governance, he did precisely nothing. Did he believe that the market would solve all these problems? We had 10 finance companies go belly up. The most important was South Canterbury Finance. The Minister intervened there. He intervened there to make sure the government did not accept a recapitalisation package that would have limited the taxpayers' loss to $500 million. How much have they lost now? $1.2 billion, $700 million. And at lunchtime, as Phil Goff said, we had the honour to attend a lunch paid for by Parliament's cleaners. They paid for it and we enjoyed the lunch on them. They are paid $13.50 an hour And this government lost $700 million because it believed in the righteous market. Failed.
I call the Honourable Minister Judith Collins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker,